Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the special meeting of Avon Beach Nourishment here in Manteo this evening, February the 24th. It's now at 6 o'clock p.m. I'd like to thank everyone for attending virtually. Before we get started, I would like to offer an invocation that was is sent to us by the Reverend Spotswood Graves, prayer for this commissioners meeting this evening. Lord God of creation, we praise you for every sign of things working together, for the regular return of morning after night, warmth of sun and summer breezes, for creatures of the deep and the freedoms we sense viewing ocean expands and blue skies. We honor you for signs of humans, friends and strangers, working together for the good of all. The beauty of new bridges, men and machines working together to move sand and ferry us across waters. We thank you for roads, live electric lines, clean running water, care for property documents, decisions made at ballot boxes, and neighbors gathering together to share community concerns. Thank you for every trustworthy public official, for these servants here today. Give us hearts and ears to hear each other. Let us rejoice to live together in grace and in hope. Destroy disease amongst us and bind us broken hearts, spirits, and bodies. Show us you have already given us in your creation enough for all. Teach us how to share. This we pray in hope and in gratitude. Now may we stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. Once again, I want to thank those of you who have tuned in this evening for this virtual meeting to talk about the proposed Avon Beach Nourishment project. This Board of Commissioners here this evening, we welcome your input, and we appreciate all of you who have turned in to live stream this meeting, and also those of you who have submitted comments to our board. Each and every one of the board members have received these, and they're certainly given them your full consideration. Earlier this month, in the early part of February, the county mailed out approximately 3,700 letters to property owners in Avon to share the county's proposed plans for beach nourishment and to ask for your feedback. We've received 276 emails from people regarding this issue. And we have also received 45 people who have signed up to ask questions or to give comments this evening during the question and answer period of this meeting. Our county manager will provide an overview of the project and what we're proposing to do and why we're proposing to do it, after offering a brief history of shoreline erosion and beach nourishment efforts here on the Outer Banks. So, at the end of his presentation, we're going to open the floor to hear from those of you who have registered to speak this evening. So let's not waste any more time and let's get started. And I'd like to ask the county manager, Mr. Bobby Alton, to come forward and make the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you all for joining us tonight. In order for us to sort of talk about beach nourishment and what our plans are for the future in Avon, we have to go back a little bit and talk about how we got here, what the history of beach nourishment is. And in doing that, it'll make more sense as we start explaining specifically what we're going to do in Avon. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a plan or a project planned in Nags Head. It was a federal project, which meant it was designed by the Corps. It was a pretty robust project and a pretty expensive project. At that time, there was Corps money or federal money available. It was a 10-mile long project, and they paid for that with a 70% federal money, 20% state money, and 10% local money. In order to do that project, Dare County got legislation passed to allow us to have a beach nourishment tax or an occupancy tax dedicated to beach nourishment, and that was put in place to pay for the local share. However, the federal share never came through. Through many years, a decade or more, through multiple administrations in both parties, there was never any federal money, and with no federal money, that meant there was no state money. So what happened was there was no way to do the project unless Nags Head and the county decided to go forward and do this on their own. So Nags Head became the first municipality in Dare County to take on a beach nourishment project. They planned the project, they hired the consultants, they did all the hard work to try to figure out what to do and how to do it. And they consulted with the county and the county leaders at that time to figure out how to pay for that project. And at the end of those discussions, they finally settled on the town of Nags Head paying about 50% of the cost of that 10-mile project, or of the project that they did, and the county paying the other 50% of that cost. The county's share of the beach nourishment cost in Nags Head came from the 2% occupancy tax that I talked about a second ago. So 50% of the cost came from that. And that was a fund that today generates somewhere around, averaging around $10 million a year. I think it was around $11.2 million this year, but generally around $11 million or $10 million per year. And so that fund is what we use to pay for beach nourishment and is the fund that we used then as well. Nags Head then had to pay their 50% share, and so they created a service district and taxed the residents inside that service district for the town share of that project. The town went on and built the project, and it was completed right at about almost the same day that Hurricane Irene hit. Irene hit, I think, in the evening. The next morning when the sun came up, we all hopped in four-wheel drives and waded through the water here in Manteo and went to Jeanette's Pier to see what happened. We didn't know whether the beach nourishment held. We didn't know what to expect. We had seen all the flooding that had happened in Manteo, and we thought, wow, what's going to happen over there? And when we got there, to our surprise and our delight, there had been no damage. The road was not under the water. You could see the beach. The beach was still there. It was still wide like they had just built it. None of the oceanfront infrastructure had been damaged, and the beach nourishment project was a rounding success, and we all sighed a big sigh of relief. However, the next step we went is we went over the then Bonner Bridge to head down south to see what was going on, and found that we couldn't get there. And the reason we couldn't get there is because Rodanthe wasn't as lucky as we were in Nags Head. In Rodanthe, the road had been destroyed. Couldn't get through, you couldn't pass through, the pavement was gone, the ocean was over the road, and there were all kinds of problems. And we wound up having to use an emergency ferry for nearly 30 days to try to get some semblance of relief down there to bring food, water, supplies, fuel, all the things we needed for recovery. It made it difficult and near impossible to move people with our EMS system, and so we were working really hard to do it. But we were working on a ferry system that would take 400 cars a day over there when the Bonner Bridge was used to having like 50,000 cars a day go over it. And so you can see there was a huge difference in our capacity and what we could actually do with that ferry. And the toll that it took on the people and the toll that it took on the county and the economics of the county was very severe. The Nags Head project also showed us that we were going to have to do projects in other places we felt like sometime in the future, and we had to come up with a way to manage our money. How are we going to manage the funds that came into that beach nourishment fund? So we hired a consultant, and we had the consultant come in and help us create a financial model to help us project funds for future projects and to make sure we could take care of projects that we already had. The financial advisors that we hired sat with us, and we talked about what were our goals, what were we going to do, what did we want that model to do for us. And so we started talking about that, and one of the goals was to put sand on beaches when it's needed and where it's needed to the extent of the funds that we had available. We did not want to sit on the funds while beaches deteriorated in one place while waiting to see if possible in some unknown location at some unknown time a beach may deteriorate somewhere else. If we had money and we had deteriorating beaches, our goal was to put sand there to repair those beaches. To do that, we needed to project our future costs. How much is it going to cost to do projects? What are we talking about? And as we add projects, we've got to add those costs into this model. Similarly, we had to project our future revenues. What did we expect revenue to do over time and sort of help us figure out how much we were going to have to do these future projects. We made it a goal that we were going to make sure we had money anytime we did a project to do the maintenance on any project that we had already done. It didn't make sense to invest $20 million in a project and then not have enough money 5 years later to do the maintenance on that project and let that $20 million go to waste. And so in all projects, our policy and our goal and our model was to be sure we set aside enough money to do the future maintenance on any project that we approved. And then finally, we had to leverage our money. We felt like we could take the money further if we borrowed the money on a short-term note. If we borrowed on a 5-year term, which is the life of most projects, we could stretch that money out. We wouldn't need all the cash up front, and it would allow us to do more beaches. But in order to borrow that money, you have to pay it back. And so we wanted to be sure that we kept 1 year's debt service in the fund to be sure that if we had a storm or something that happened in, say, May or June that took out a whole season of occupancy tax, that we would have enough money available to pay that debt service for that year until we could get to the next season and have another season. And sure enough, after seeing the Nags Head project and the success that they had there, Duck, Kill Devil Hills, and Kitty Hawk decided they needed to do projects themselves. At the end of working on the Kitty Hawk project, Southern Shores also came in and decided that they needed to do a small section of their project at the same time. As with the Nags Head project, the county paid a share and the towns paid a share. On average, not exactly, but on average, the county paid about 50% of the projects, and on average, the towns paid 50%. It was a little bit more in some towns and a little bit less in others, but on average, it was 50%. And on every town, there was a service district created, and those in the service district paid for a portion of the town's share of the projects. At about the same time as the town's projects were coming to fruition, it became apparent that Buxton needed a project as well. We were concerned that Buxton was going to be a rodanthe. We didn't have any issues, believe it or not, at Avon at that time. At Avon at that time, we had a big old wide beach. We had 2 or 3 rows of dunes, and nobody imagined at that time that Avon would be anything like it is today. So the beach nourishment project in Buxton we began planning on that. And as I said, our goal was to prevent the loss of Highway 12 as it occurred in Rodanthe. We could not get DOT help there because DOT didn't see that as an emergency. For them, it's not an emergency until you have the highway doing what we see there. And it's not even an emergency then until it happens multiple times. And the county didn't feel like we could wait till it happened multiple times in Buxton before anything was done about it. And so proactively, the board at that time decided we needed to do something there to prevent what happened in Rodanthe from happening in Buxton. Again, there was no DOT help, no funding for this, so it's something we had to do on our own. We needed to be proactive. We ran the model that I just described to you. We plugged in all the town's projects. We plugged in the Buxton project. We plugged in the future maintenance at the Nags Head project and all the other parameters that go into the model. And when we ran it, we found that there was sufficient funds in the fund to do something in Buxton. Just as in Nags Head and in all the other towns, a service district was created, and that service district was used, and the people in the Buxton community paid a share of the project. That contribution came from the benefited area of the project, much as it's done in all of the other projects that have been done in the county. The project was constructed, and though many people have seen the beach erode away over the years, it's been successful because it's done what its goal was to do, and that was to prevent the loss of Highway 12 and to mitigate the flooding in the project area. And so while we've had sand and water on the road and all of those things, we didn't have the loss of the road that shut down the economy for long periods of time. The problems we've had there since we did nourishment have been problems that can be fixed in a day or so and try to get things back to normal quickly. So why does Avon need beach nourishment? Avon didn't used to be a hot spot. As I said before, there was no flooding, there was no overwash, there was 2 rows of dunes, there was a big wide beach, and nobody ever anticipated that that was the hot spots. When you identified hot spots, you never identified Avon. None of the long-range planning looked at Avon because it just wasn't a place that anybody expected to have the problems that we're having. In 5 years, that has changed dramatically. The rate of the erosion in the Avon area has increased dramatically. You can see now that the ocean, the water level is right along the part of the houses there. Where those houses are, there used to be, again, as I've said a couple of times, 2 rows of dunes and a wide beach, and that's like been in the last 5 years. At the rate of erosion that we've got now, it's not a long ways before we're to the next row of houses. So it's significant, and that significance isn't just when we have a hurricane. That significance is now become whenever we have a nor'easter, or really whenever we have a blow of any substance, we have the problems that are created in Avon, both on the ocean side there that you see in the picture, as well as along Highway 12 and the problems that it occurs there. When we have that flooding, the flooding impedes our first responders. We can't get ambulances through to keep people safe. We can't get fire trucks through. And we've had problems even getting the sanitation through to pick up trash. Our recovery efforts, if it's from a hurricane, trying to get the community back, we can't get in and out. We can't move things. We can't get fuel, water, things in that we need because the road is flooded. And the impact that it has on people's homes and their lives. They can't go to the doctor. They can't get to the grocery store. They can't do the things that they normally do because the water's over the road. And that's only going to get worse. The longer we wait, the worse that's going to get, the deeper that it's going to get, and the more expensive it's going to be to try to fix it. It also negatively affects our economy. It affects the businesses in Avon. The people's livelihoods are at stake down there, as well as our overall economy. And so it's important that we do something. We cannot allow Avon, just like we said in Buxton, we cannot allow Avon to become another problem like we had in Rodanthe. With all that said, the people in Rodanthe the people in Avon came to the board and asked the board to help us do something. What can we do? What can you do? How can you help us? It was clear to everybody that something needed to be done. So What we did is we hired a consulting firm, Coastal Science and Engineering, to do a study. We paid them to come out and do a study and figure out what needed to be done to solve the problems in Avon. That study was completed at the end of 2020, and they recommended a project at a cost of between $11 and $14 million to solve those problems. That project, if it's done, will place about 1 million cubic yards of sand along the beach of Avon. That sand will create a beach about 120 to 125 feet wide. It'll maintain and equilibrate over the 5 years, and at the time that we have to do our next maintenance, it'll probably be in the neighborhood of 75 feet wide, and at that time it'll get built back to the same 120 to 125 feet. The project area will be from about 3,000 feet north of the Avon Pier at Due East Road. And it'll go south all the way to the southern boundary of Avon. It's a distance of about 2.5 miles. And if everything goes as we hope and we can get the permits in time and the bidding comes in right and all the things fall in place, we hope to be able to start that project in the spring of 2022. And once we get it started, we expect it to be completed within about 90 days. So now the question becomes, how do we pay for it? And that's probably why most, if not all of you, are tuned into this meeting. As I previously stated to you, the beach nourishment will cost us around $11 to $14 million. Assuming that we can do it at the same time that we do Buxton, which is what our plan is, it's going to be closer to the $11 million number, and that is our plan. Similarly, as we started this, Southern Shores has had erosion and needs a beach nourishment project as well, and they have a cost too of about $14 million. At the time that I sent you all this letter a few weeks ago, the Beach Nourishment Fund had about $8.5 million in it, and we had $28 million worth of projects we were trying to figure out how to do. We've worked for more than a year trying to figure out how can we pay for these projects? How can we leverage that $8.5 million? What can we do? Where can we get money? How can we figure out how to make this happen in these communities? There are no federal or state funds available, none. We've been to the state, we've been to the federal government, we've talked to the Park Service, we've been to every source of funds that we have, and we've been unsuccessful in getting funds. And so if we're going to do the project, somehow it's got to be done with funds that we generate in the county. As with other projects, all of them are paid. As I said, the average is about half coming from the community where the project is done. All of those projects have had service districts and will, if Southern Shores goes forward with theirs, they'll have a service district as well. And so the communities where the projects have been built, everywhere in the county that has had beach nourishment have had to pay a portion of the cost of those projects. So with all of that said, without having any other funding sources and with the $8.5 million, what did we do and how did we come up with a plan to pay for this? Fortuitously, I suppose, last fall, Duck, Kitty Hawk, Kill Devil Hills, and Nag's Head, as well as the county, received a $1.4 million grant from the state. That grant was a grant to be used solely for beach nourishment. It was a one-time grant. It's not recurring, and it could only be used for beach nourishment projects. By running our model and updating our revenues and reviewing our future projections and taking the cost estimates that we had from the towns and for the Avon project, we found that if the county reduced its contribution to each of the towns in the future by $1.4 million and left that in the fund, and that's in this plan. And by the way, we have talked with all of the towns about this, and they've all agreed to it. They understand what we need to do and why they're doing it, and presumably they can replace what we've removed from what we had expected to contribute to them. They can replace that with the grant that they just received. And if Avon and Southern Shores each contributed to the town at 50% of the cost, if Avon and Southern Shores each contributed 50% of the cost of the project, as was done in the towns, then both the Avon project and the Southern Shores projects could be built. So how does Avon then pay for their half? Well, to move forward in Avon, again, the county proposes that Avon contributes approximately 50% of the cost of this nourishment project. The project cannot be performed without that money coming from Avon. There is no other revenue source. There is nowhere else to get that money. And as I said before, if we hold off on the project, the problems only become worse, and time is not our friend. It costs us more money in the future to solve it, and there'll come a day in the not too near future where these costs will go up astronomically. We've got to get out ahead of this, do it while we can afford it, and do it so that we can maintain it and we don't have those problems. So we've got to act now. At the time of my letter to you all a few weeks ago, we said that about $1.3 million a year is needed from the Avon taxpayers to pay the debt service for the money that we borrowed. And I told you before, we borrow the money in order to leverage those costs. And at the time that I sent you this letter, it said that we would require a 40-cent tax for those inside the project area, east of Highway 12, and 10 cents from the rest of the property owners in Avon. However, since the date of that letter, we've gotten, as of last week, we got the most recent occupancy tax figures from the state. We plugged those in, and on Friday ran the model again. And I have some good news that as we ran that model, what we found was we have more money in the fund than we did. We can therefore do this project, and we don't need $1.3 million. We only need $750,000 out of Avon to pay the community share of the project. That reduction allows us to do a pretty substantial reduction in that tax rate, which means that the 40-cent tax rate can be reduced to 25 cents, and the 10-cent tax rate can be reduced to 5 cents. That 5 cents is actually 4.69 and some change, but we're using 5 cents because I can say it easier. So it's 25 cents and 5 cents, and so what does that mean to you all? Again, it means that as we had proposed before, everybody in Avon would be paying something for this. All properties east of Highway 12 from Due East Road to the southern boundary of Avon would be taxed at the 25 cents per $100 in value rate. And on that slide you see there, that's the dark blue area. All the remaining parcels, which are the light blue area, would be charged at a rate of 5 cents or 4.69 cents per $100 of value as well. Just that 25-cent rate is very similar to the rate that was charged to the Buxton property owners when we did the Buxton property. If the board chooses to go forward with this plan and builds the Avon project, then all of the money that's in the Beach Nourishment Fund will have been spent, and there is no money left in the project for additional projects in the near future. So what does that mean to you as a taxpayer? Again, we'll have, for a parcel of land that's valued at $500,000, the 25 cents tax would be $1,250 per year. For a parcel of land valued at $500,000, the 5-cent tax would be $250 a year. And obviously, if the property is only valued at $250,000, then the cost per year would be $125. So that's a substantial reduction from what we had thought was going to be necessary until we got these latest occupancy tax numbers. If we go forward with the project, the tax would be incorporated into your tax bill that comes out this coming August or September. And questions have come up about how long would we have to pay this tax? Beach nourishment projects are designed to last 5 years. We borrow the money on a 5-year note, After the 5-year period, you have to come back in and after the 5-year period, you have to come back in and do maintenance, and so you would borrow the money again. In order to pay the debt service during those 5 years, we use the funds that we generate from the occupancy tax, I'm sorry, with the money we generate from the tax service district that you pay to pay that debt service down. And so that'll happen on 5-year cycles, which means that as long as we have beach nourishment, these tax revenues will be necessary, and we'll have to continue to do those. The rate that we charge can go up or down. It went down, obviously, from 40 to 25 and from 10 to 5 over the last several weeks because the revenue picture improved enough that we could do that. If that would happen in the future, then the board has the option to do that as well. Similarly, if the costs of beach nourishment go up and the revenues don't keep up, then to continue doing beach nourishment, that tax may have to go higher. And that would be a decision that would be made then. Again, we would go through this same process. Do we do it at all? And if so, at what cost? So it's not guaranteed that this is the rate forever. We've had questions, is beach nourishment the only option that we have available? In 2003, the legislature banned all hardened structures on beaches. You can't have seawalls, you can't have groins, you can't have jetties, you can't have terminal groins and all that. They have since allowed terminal groins in 2 or 3 locations in North Carolina, but other than that, there are no hardened structures allowed on the beach. The law bans all new permanent erosion control structures on beaches within the state. There are other options that people talk about, geotubes, offshore reefs, all those kinds of things that maybe technically are not hardened structures, but they are not approved in North Carolina either, and the law prohibits those. Because of those rules and the laws that are in place, there are no other options, no tools available for permanent, or as permanent as we can make it, solutions to beach nourishment. The sandbags you see in there have a 5-year life. You can't have them forever. If you have a beach nourishment project, you have to do it, and then theoretically the sandbags are either covered up or removed. And so there are no other solutions for us other than a beach nourishment project. People ask, does beach nourishment really work? The evidence in the areas within the county is that beach nourishment has been a success. You can see what has happened in Buxton from 2016 and what it was to what it was in 2018. It's now back closer to 2016, and it's time to do maintenance in Buxton. Beach nourishment works. If you look at Buxton, the problems that we had in Buxton were only sand and water. We haven't lost the road. If you go to Kitty Hawk, they haven't lost Highway 12 again. It has mitigated the flooding in all the areas that it has been done. And so it has been successful where we have done it. What happens if we don't do it in Avon? Again, erosion will continue to worsen. Homes will continue to sustain flood damage. Highway 12 will continue to flood and become impassable. And we'll have the same problems with our first responders, our visitors, our sanitation collection, and so on that we've talked about previously. Tourism will be negatively affected, and the cost for future nourishment and solutions will only increase and become more expensive. So it's not a question of if, it's a matter of when, and when determines how much it's going to cost, and now is as cheap as it's going to get. So the tax implementation, we update our models that I've talked about. That model is probably 10 to 14 pages long at any given time, and we update it with all the most recent information as soon as we get it. We're at version, this says 26H, it's actually 26H1 or 2 or 3, but that represents over 200 runs of that model just so we can keep abreast of our funds, keep our plans current, and make sure we make the best use of the money that we have available and stretch that money as far as we can stretch it. Again, our revenues have improved and over the projections in my previous letter. And if we decide to start this project, we will proceed with the project and accept the bid for a 2022 start. And as I said before, the tax would be implemented in July 1st of this year, to be paid and show up in your tax bill that you get in August or September. The Board of Commissioners recognizes the impact of this tax increase and will make and has always made every effort to keep tax rates as low as possible. We're proud that our tax rates and our ad valorem tax are the 6th lowest in the state, and the board works really hard to make sure we keep it that way. And so they don't do these nourishment projects and raise these taxes without much thought. But again, the cost to not doing it seems to be greater than the cost to do it, and obviously something is needed to be done. So what happens next? The county manager and the Board of Commissioners, I and the board have received all the emails that you have sent out. They've read them all, they've got them all. We will take all the comments that we're going to receive in a minute into consideration. And then at one of our March board meetings, probably the second meeting, I'm not sure yet, I don't think we're going to do it this coming meeting, but if we do, we will. The board will take all this information and make some decisions on what they were going to do. They have to first decide whether to proceed with the project, and if they do decide to proceed with the project, they then have to decide what the final tax rate is going to be. Is it going to be the rate projected? And we would assume that it would be if we went through with the project. If they then decide to proceed with the project and set a tax rate, then another public hearing like this will be required by statute, and a letter will be mailed out to all the property owners letting them know what the tax rate will be, and that will be the final rate, if you will. Again, we'll use the model, we'll use what the projections showed, and I'm sure that we'll be at that 25-cent and 5-cent range if we go forward with the project. So we had a number of questions emailed to us, and so I'll try to go through and answer as many of those as I can. We hope that in the presentation that I just made that we've answered a lot of the questions that many of you may have. But we'll go through the email questions with you now, and I'll answer those questions, and then we'll come back to you all and see if there's other comments or questions. One of the questions is, how wide will the beaches be at the completion of the project? As I said earlier, it'll be around 120 feet. It'll be wider in some places and a little narrow in others, depending on what the rates of erosion are, but that's sort of the average. The idea is to add 75 feet of beach and keep that 75, and then you add the remaining of the 120 or 125 or so, and that's the part that erodes, and by the time that erodes, you still have 75, and you would come back and add more beach later on. Similarly, as we do that, we'll be enhancing the dunes in that area, and I think there's a question about planting beach grass, and we typically do that as well to try to stabilize the area. Next, there's a question specifically where are you going to get the sand for the project? There are sort of two sources for sand. I'm ahead of myself here on the. There you go. Most of the time these projects are done from offshore sand sources. We have an offshore sand source identified, and that's where previous projects have been done, and that's likely what we would do here. There has been an offer made to use an onshore sand site. I don't know whether that would be used or not. We don't know whether the sand is compatible. We don't know how much that would cost. We don't know the logistics of how we would get it to the beach, where we'd put it on the beach, how we would move it on the beach and all that. And so our consultants will look at all of those options, but it's likely that the sand will come from an offshore borrow site. I mentioned it before, there was a question about will foliage be planted, and yes, we typically put foliage on the beaches, plant the beaches after they're done to try to help stabilize them. Next question was, have we considered adding a new tax on visitors outside the portion of the occupancy tax that goes to beach nourishment? We've looked at all kinds of funding sources, but right now we don't have the authority to add any new taxes of any kind. The only authority we have are for the taxes that we have and for doing the service districts that we've talked about earlier. Unless we get some other authority, we can't do anything to generate new revenue at all. So no, we don't have any authority to do those things. It's a question about, can we put a toll on the bridges and use that for beach nourishment? Again, we don't have that authority. All the tolling authorities with the state, and unless the state chose to do that, if they chose to do that, agreed to give us all the money they generated, then we couldn't do that either. So there's no way that we can just do that on our own. We don't have that authority. Why isn't the state forced to pay for the project since it's Highway 12? And they have to fix it when they wash it out. So DOT looks at things differently, I suppose, than we do. They don't have funds available to go do this, and they don't act on those roads until there's an emergency. And so we had a long conversation in Buxton, and we've had some conversation with Avon, but what is an emergency in your eyes? And in our eyes, we're trying to avert an emergency. In their eyes, they don't act until an emergency occurs. And so if you go back to Rodanthe, that road washed out, I don't know how many times, multiple times before they determined it had washed out enough times to constitute an emergency, at which time a beach nourishment project was done, and they repaired the road, and then they began on the bridge replacement there. But that didn't occur until we had all the problems that we've talked about, and they happened more than once. I mean, multiple times. Our philosophy was, why don't we do something now before that happens? Why put the community through all that pain, all that hardship? Why put that stress on the economy, on our service sector, all the problems that are associated with that road going out? Why put that stress on them when we're ultimately going to have to do the project? Let's do it now and let's get it done. They said, we understand what you're saying, we see what you're doing, but we're not allowed to do that. We don't have funding to do that, and we don't call it emergency yet there. And so they will not help us with the funding of that project. The next question was, why doesn't FEMA help us with the project? Let's see, there I am. Why doesn't FEMA help us with it? FEMA doesn't do upfront construction projects like that, but FEMA will help us. They're going to help us in Buxton. Once we have a project in place, if we lose sand as a result of a declared disaster, typically that's a named storm, but not always, then FEMA will come in and reimburse us the cost to replace the sand that we lost. So a portion of the project that we're doing in Buxton is being paid for with FEMA dollars, and those FEMA dollars are to replace the sand that we lost in those storms. The next question is, can't you just tax the property owners on the east side of the highway to pay for the project? I suppose you could do that. The real answer is the statute that gives us the authority to have a service district to pay for these types of projects says that you have to charge the people who were benefited from the project. And if you say that only the people on one side of the road are benefited, then yes, you could do that. But if the others in the community are benefited, as they are, we think, then you have to charge them for that too. So you have to charge those that are most directly benefited to the project. So what we'll do is, the ocean side is the most directly benefited. We'll create a tax service district, call it Tax Service District A, and District A will be charged 25 cents. We'll create a service district on the west side of the road, that'll be Tax Service District B, and that tax service district, because it gets a lesser benefit, will be charged 5 cents. And so that fits under the statute, that addresses the benefit issue under the statute and allows us to do that. Similar to that question is, why don't we just tax everybody? Again, we have that same direct benefit analysis. As you get further down, the benefits aren't as direct. Someone in Avon who can get to the grocery store, someone in Hatteras Village who can get to the grocery store, who can do the things they need to move about their community, aren't getting as great a benefit as the people, say, on the west side of the highway who are getting it, and they certainly aren't getting near the benefit the people on the ocean side. As you move away from those direct benefits, then your ability to support those should they get challenged is diminished, and the risks increase. If we take that risk and we're wrong, then we have to pay that money back. And so that isn't a direct enough benefit, we don't think, to allow us to tax the rest of the village. But similarly, let's just say we did do that. Then what do we do when we have to do a project in Frisco or Hatteras Village? We've now taxed them for a project in Avon. So now Avon and Hatteras Village are paying for the Avon project. But now we have to do one in Hatteras Village. So are we going to now tax Hatteras Village again on top of Avon? Because there's no way we could tax Avon for the Hatteras Village project because we couldn't substantiate that they got a benefit. So now Hatteras Village would be paying double taxes, one for their own project and one for a project in Avon. And so taxing everybody leaves it where we could not do future projects in other areas. The next question is, why is it taxed the same amount for improved properties versus unimproved properties? Because the state statutes require us to have a uniform tax. So within Service District 1, everybody in Service District 1 has to pay the same thing. Within Service District 2, everybody in Service District 2 has to pay the same thing. We can't bifurcate the tax within the same service district, and that's by statute. We can't change that. Next question was, are there any grants that we can get or the Avon folks can get to help pay for this project? There are not. We have been to the federal government, we've been to our legislative delegation, we've been to the state. People in Avon have been to the state and to the feds. We have been pushing for some time for a state beach nourishment fund. We've asked, we've tried. We hear back that they understand, but they have not identified a funding source, and they have not identified a recurring source of funds or put money in it. They have done a study that would tell them how much they need, but we haven't had any movement on funding that yet, and those have been unsuccessful, and we have no idea when or if that will ever occur. So what we have found over time, and again, as I said at the very beginning, people started looking at this back in the late 80s and early 90s, we have not found a way to fund these projects other than fund it through the funds that we can generate through our occupancy taxes and that the communities can generate through their service districts. The next question is if the special assessment will raise $1.3 million annually, what they're asking is, what's the breakdown? How much does each tax generate? I didn't do it for the 40 and the 10 because we're not using that number any longer, but the 25-cent tax generates around $529,000, and the 5-cent tax generates around $235,000. And yes, I know that adds up to more than $750,000, but we have to factor in the uncollectible part of the taxes and all that. So those are what those two taxes generate. The next question is, given the significant public funding on this project, are we going to provide public access? The plan doesn't have any public access in it at the moment. The access would be to the beaches of Avon just as it is now. The Park Service essentially owns the beaches and controls the access, and so the access would be through their ramp system, and we would simply have what we've always had, but we will have a wider beach to do what we've always done on, and we'll have the protection that generates. The next question, it says, how will we deal with wastewater drainage? I think what they meant is, how are we going to deal with stormwater drainage above and beyond tidal overwash to keep Highway 12 open? We have met with DOT multiple times about that issue. In fact, we've got a group that's working now, and you'll hear more about that in later board meetings, trying to figure out solutions to those problems. The DOT ditch system that they have now is designed simply to take the runoff that runs off of the road. It's called an inundation system, which means that the runoff runs in the ditch and then it either soaks into the groundwater or it evaporates. It is not connected to the sound. It's not designed to be connected to the sound. And so they don't have a system to move that water. And so we've talked about it. We've had them out there, and a couple years ago, they cleaned the culverts. I don't know, that may have done some good, but clearly something needs to be done, and we don't know what it is, nor do they yet. But those discussions are happening, and everyone's aware that that is a problem. Next question is, how will the project be managed? Dare County will manage all aspects of that project. We have a project manager whose job it is to manage these kinds of projects. He'll be on top of that. Our finance director will be on top of the money and how we've done it. This isn't the first project we've done. We've done all the other town projects in conjunction with the towns. We've done the Buxton projects, and so we're well capable to manage, and we will manage it. Our consultants will have people on the ground to make sure that we're getting the volumes and doing the things that we want before we pay them, so that we can be sure we're paying for what we get. And so there's a process for all that, and we will handle all that. DOT is not involved in this at all, and the National Park Service isn't involved except to the extent that they have to permit the project, and we have to follow the terms and the conditions of the permit that they give us because they control those beaches. How will property owners be able to oversee the project while it's taking place? I'm not sure what the question is with regard to oversee. The property owners will be able to access the beach. They can come to the beach except right where the bulldozers are working. That area will be roped off. But there'll be areas between the work site and the dune that allow people to walk past it so you can get around the work site. Outside the roped off area, if there's a pipe there, then there'll be walkovers built so you can walk over the pipe to get to the beach. And as they move down the beach, the pipes get moved so they're not always in one place at one time. And so you all will be able to, as the property owners will be able to see what's going on, we'll be able to be out there on the beach, and we'll be able to get to the beach during the project. When it's right directly in front of a cottage, that cottage can't go out, straight out to the beach. They're going to have to go to the left or to the right to get around the work zone, but they'll still have access to the beach. In terms of if you have problems, we will have a phone number that we will publish when we start doing the project. And if you call that number, then we will get someone there, our project manager or our consultant or the construction manager from the company who's doing the beach nourishment out there to try to solve that problem. And so that'll be published as we go forward. And as we go forward, we will publish a lot more information about times and places and when and how, but we won't know any of that until we've bid the project and we have the contractor on board and he can give us his construction schedule. That covers all of the questions that were submitted and all the comments and things that we've received by email. We're going to move forward here in just a second to answer any questions of those who have signed up to either comment or ask questions. I hope that we've got everybody on here. I apologize for the technical glitch that occurred last night, and there was some confusion about the meeting. But again, I think we got everybody and we've got them back. At the end of this, I'll come back, and anybody who signed up who, for whatever reason, we lost them when we had the system go down last night, we'll try to get them back, and we'll let them click on the raise my hand feature to raise your hand if I don't call on you in just a minute. So with that said.
Updated list
Okay.
of people that are not tuned in off of that.
If you have a question tonight, or if I don't answer your question tonight, or you're not signed up to ask a question tonight, down the road, you can, I'll leave this up as we talk. That's our website. You can give questions there. If you send a question there, even after tonight, we'll try to answer your questions. If you have comments and you send them there after tonight, we'll share those comments with the board. And anything we get from you all between now and the time that the board makes its decision, we'll share with the board so they'll have that before them as they go forward. If you please bear with us as we go through this, we have, through this system and with as many people that we have on it, we have control of what we have electronically here in our room, but we don't have control of what's going on your end. And so if you're garbled or we're garbled or things are happening there because of modems or the rate that you're taking in data on your computer or whatever, we can't control those things, and we apologize for that. But again, if for something that happens we can't hear you or get you, please send us your comments or your questions at the email address that's shown up on that screen, and we'll get back to you. So I'll start with my list. First on my list is Ken Batinger. And
Yes, sir. Thank you.
thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
My question is this. I understand that Avon definitely needs a beach nourishment. It's obvious to everyone with the ocean overwash. What is the pressing need behind Southern Shores getting it done in 2022? I haven't seen ocean overwash across their highway, or the need to get it done in 2022 does not seem as pressing. Not to throw a sidebar in there, but especially because there's no public parking for county members there.
Southern Shores, the elected people in Southern Shores have looked at their erosion problem, and they believe that they need to do a project in that area. They're being proactive with their project. They're putting more sand in some areas and less sand in other areas to try to prevent Southern Shores from becoming a problem like we're having in Avon. So they're getting out ahead of it. The sort of the underlying part of that is, if we didn't do Southern Shores, then could we somehow do a tax rate lower in Avon? And the answer is probably not. We're borrowing the money for Southern Shores as well, and we're using the money that we're receiving from they're using the money that they're receiving from the taxes that they put on their citizens to pay that borrowing. So if we borrow what we're already borrowing for Avon and then had to go back and borrow what we were going to borrow for Southern Shores, you would be paying double that, because we would have had to borrow twice as much money. Remember, we only had $8.5 million in the fund. You've got an $11 to $14 million project, and you're going to pay now a little less than half of the cost of that project. And so the Southern Shores project really doesn't impact very much on what's happening in Avon. I'll also take you back to Buxton. You know, the 25 cent or so that is going to be charged to the ocean side in Avon is substantially the same as the rate that was charged in Buxton at the time that they did their project. Now, they've since had a little bit of a rate reduction with revaluation, but that was what it was in the beginning of that project. And so you're paying in Avon substantially the same as what was paid in Buxton. Next question was, next person on the list was Rob Bell.
You're not on the
Hello?
phone call.
Mr. Bell, you on?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so my question is, sorry. My question is, the amount of vehicular traffic on the beaches, especially in Avon, in the Avon area, has there been any study done on how that might affect, or if that affects erosion on the beach?
I would say, has there been a study? Not that I'm aware of. I will tell you that the Park Service controls the access to the beach, and access to the beach is the livelihood of the Outer Banks, and being able to have vehicular access on Hatteras Island is a big deal, and was something that we all, the county and a lot of people on Hatteras Island, fought hard to get back in 2008 and 2009, and went as far as went to Congress to make sure that we could continue to have that vehicular access on those beaches. And so the management plan for access to the beaches came out of all of that, the legislation we tried to get, the lawsuit that was filed, all the fight that was had back then, and the management plan that we have now is what the Park Service has put in place to allow access to meet the need and the demand of the public. I don't think there's anybody that would say that the driving on the beach has caused the problems that we have in Avon. That rate of erosion that accelerated that quickly certainly isn't as a result of driving on the beaches, because we've driven on the beaches for many years prior to that without having these kinds of problems. So no, there's not been a study, and I don't think there's going to be any changes to the access except while the construction's actually going on. Next on the list is Paul Bucher.
Thank you very much. Thank you all you guys
Yes, sir.
for all your hard work. Two questions actually. I think you addressed one of them already, but I just want to clarify. It seems a little bit, I don't know another word, but a little unfair for people who don't rent their properties to pay the same as people who do. Because the people who do, they would take that extra tax out of their income generated from their rent, as opposed to people like us who don't rent. It would come directly out of our pocket.
Well,
That's one question.
oh, that's one question. Well, the answer to your question is that we don't have the authority to make that distinction. We can't go under the state statutes is we have to tax if we're going to do a property tax, all property owners in the taxing area have to pay the same rate. We can't charge you one rate and the guy across the street from you another rate because of how you've decided to use your property. We have to charge the same rate, and so we have no choice about that at all.
Okay,
What's your
understood.
second question?
Thank you. My second question is, our house is on Wahoo Circle, which is north of where all this is going to happen. There has been beach erosion on the north part of Avon. So what will happen when the north part of Avon starts having this same issue? Because there's going to be a lot smaller revenue source because there's a lot less people north of Avon.
Well, the answer to your question is not unique to Avon. The question is what happens when we need beach nourishment in other places in the county, whether it's North Avon or Hatteras Village or Isabel Inlet or the Canal Zone or one of the towns. And the answer is in the short run, there's no more funding left in the county beach nourishment fund. We have used all the funding that we have available. Now, as things go forward, if the revenues, if we have a couple more years like we had this year, then that fund will replenish. If the costs go down to do projects or the projects last longer because we have good weather, then the fund improves. As I said earlier, we run the fund model often, and as those funds improve, then we go and we'll use those funds to do projects where projects are needed. And if the north end of Avon is the next place that needs it and we have funds, then likely that's where it would go. If the next place that needs it is somewhere else and we have funds, then that's likely where it would go. But we keep evaluating this often, and as we have funds available, we look to see where those funds are needed, and if they're not, we continue to accumulate those funds until it is needed somewhere. Next is Dean Burbank.
Yes, Bobby, thank you for a wonderful, cogent briefing. You've answered so many questions very well. I appreciate that. I do have one question about service district designation. And that is, right now you have designated an east of Highway 12 service district, I think you called it A, and west of Highway 12 for B. I wonder if any consideration has been made in dividing A into like A1 and A2 with beachfront and non-beachfront because of the revenue generated from beachfront properties that are rented, and also the fact that they are going to be the primary beneficiaries and are much more vulnerable than the non-beachfront properties in that same service district A. Is there some consideration about further subdividing the tax burden between beachfront and non-beachfront? And considering that if nothing is done, then at some point the beachfront properties will disappear and the non-beachfront properties will become beachfront. I just wonder if you'd thought about that. Thank you for taking my question.
We have thought about all types of sources and all kinds of ways to do this. Again, I said in a previous slide, our goal was to keep this tax as low as possible to have the least impact we could. But I'll tell you that in the past, the board's position has been, if you compare what's been paid in other communities, that 25-cent tax is about right. That's about what other communities outside of Avon have paid in their community to have the protection they're getting, both the flood mitigation protection and the oceanfront protection. And so we felt like that was a fair tax to do that, and we did it. As you start bifurcating the taxes, if we did what you said, then the next question is, well, I'm on the northern end of the project and our beach isn't eroded as fast as the southern end, and I'm making this up, I don't know. So maybe we should have another district that charges another rate and so on. And we can break this up as many ways as you want to break it up, but then you have a cumbersome process, and if you've got to defend that, you've got to sit there and split hairs and defend the benefit. I think if you've ever ridden down on the, I think it was at Ocean View Drive after a nor'easter, after a hurricane, both sides of that road need something badly, quickly. And so we felt like that 25-cent tax was fair. Next is Cameron, I think it's Cloder. Mr. Cloder, you're on mute. If you'd unmute yourself. No? Okay, I'm going to move on from Mr. Cloder then. Next is Stephen Day.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for arranging this public hearing. It's a great opportunity for us to express our thoughts, and I think we can all agree that beach erosion in South Avon has become a big problem. And we can also all agree that the ocean overwash onto Highway 12 is also sometimes a big problem. But I have to say, I think that's where our agreement ends. I want to quickly make 3 points this evening. My first point is to address the flawed rationale behind the proposed property tax increase for Avon. I find it almost unbelievable, frankly, that you've proposed raising property taxes on private property owners in Avon to pump sand onto a beach that's owned by the U.S. federal government and to help protect a section of Highway NC 12 that's owned by the state of North Carolina. I mean, any objective person understands that it's the federal and state government authorities' responsibility to step up, protect, preserve, and fund the Cape Hatteras National Seashore and NC 12 Highway, not Avon private citizens. I mean, we've already paid our state and federal taxes, and those are the funds that should be used for this project. In essence, you're wanting to double dip into our pocketbooks to do this. Now, your February 2nd letter says that you have unsuccessfully approached our legislators, our lobbyists, and others in the legislature multiple times in an effort to obtain state funding. Okay, it's fine. But so you haven't been successful so far, go back again. Don't give up. Keep trying until you get the funding we need. The political landscape has changed dramatically since you last lobbied for funding. Democrats now control the U.S. House of Representatives, the Senate, and the White House, and we have a Democratic governor. Let me give you a couple of quotes from the Democratic platform. This is straight from their website. America's national parks and monuments, public lands, and marine protected areas are treasures that should be held in trust for future generations. We will protect these precious places and preserve America's unspoiled wilderness. Here's another quote. We will partner with states and local communities to make smart investments to avoid the loss of life and property, prevent flooding, mitigate disaster risks, and adapt to costly growing climate impacts. Now think about that for a minute. With promises like these, now is the time for the Board of Commissioners to go back to the table with Democratic-controlled government leaders and fight for funds. Fight for funds to rebuild the Cape Hatteras National Seashore Beach, as well as to protect the state highway. Look, I'm not asking you to do it alone. Engage the property and business owners on Hatteras Island to stand together with you and to write letters. We'll visit the governor's office or travel to Washington, D.C. and meet with congressional leaders. If you'll put together a plan, I'll be the first in line to help rally and organize supporters from all across Hatteras Island.
Today, you got about
Is a
10
jewel
seconds
like
left
Hatteras
of your
Island
time.
worth fighting for? I think it is. And if your answer is yes, then fight for us. Don't talk about giving up. The second point I want to make
Mr. Day,
quickly
your
is to
3
address
minutes
the
is
flaws
just,
of the
Mr. Day.
property tax plan itself.
Hey,
You're proposing a cookie cutter tax plan.
Mr. Day, your 3 minutes is up. So I'm going to respond to a couple of things that you said. Certainly, we would like DOT to solve this problem in Highway 12, but they are not, and they will not, and they have not. And we haven't used the word given up. No one's given up anything. We've talked this week about funding for it. Beach nourishment. There's a group that includes not just us, but all of the beach nourishment communities on the east coast of North Carolina that's working towards beach nourishment funding and a sustainable, long-lasting beach nourishment fund to help all of these communities. We've talked to our legislative delegation in Washington, D.C. since the elections, about beach nourishment and the problems that we're having. So this isn't something that we've given up on, nor will we give up on, because it's not the last time we're going to have to do a project. And with the limited resources that we have, we've got to find sources to do that with. Similarly, we can't wait. If we wait to see what and if they're going to do, by then the problem we're trying to prevent will happen. And so we don't have time to wait. It's not, if you don't get ahead of this, then you're behind it, and when you get behind it, it's more expensive, and you've got more problems than you can deal with. We tried starting in the late 1980s through the Nags Head project in 2011 to get federal funds, and we've tried through multiple administrations to get dollars in WRDA. WRDA is the Water Resources Development Act that funds these kinds of projects. Not only did we not get funds, but the folks in WRDA are working to reduce beach nourishment projects throughout the country and reduce those fundings. If the new administration, as you say, is going to help us, that will be fantastic, because then when the time comes to do maintenance, if they're going to pay for it, we don't have to tax to do it anymore, and we can remove the tax. But until then, we've got to do what we've got to do to protect it, and if nobody else is going to do it, it doesn't seem correct, at least our board doesn't think it's correct, for them to sit on their hands, watch everything get destroyed, watch the road wash away, create all the problems that are associated with it, and do nothing in hopes that this administration or another one might pay for it. So I think our board has decided it's time for them to act, and so we're moving on with it. Next, it's Robert and Christine DeColey. I'm guessing one or the other of you want to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I really do appreciate it. I have two more clarifying questions than really anything probing. Based on what you have said, the tax that is going to be implemented is going to be a forever tax, meaning this is a 5-year tax. Then, unless there's other funds, and I do understand what you're saying, where there's going to be a maintenance which will carry through on the tax, and we're looking at this as part of our normal tax for the foreseeable 10, 20 years kind of thing. Second question to that, sort of as a follow-up, is there any other projects that I realize and anything can happen, but just taking a look at this from a homeowner, from we rent our house, from a budgetary standpoint, besides the normal possibly increase in the tax that can always happen, is there any other major projects similar to this that we're going to have to worry about in terms of budgeting 2, 3, 4 years coming down the road?
So we don't have the authority to do tax service districts except to do certain things. Beach nourishment happens to be one of the things on the list that the statute gives us that authority. To my knowledge, and I don't say the county's never done a service district other than beach nourishment, but since I've been here, and I'm going on 14 years, we haven't done one for other than beach nourishment. So it's unlikely that we would do any kind of a tax service district to create additional taxes. And so, again, we work hard to keep our tax rate low, and I'm sure the board will continue to do that. Next is Bruce Dislinski.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hi. So I appreciate your presentation. You cited a lot of the compelling reasons why this needed to be done. And honestly, I think they were pretty straightforward. You talked about the business impact, the overall economy, the tourist industry, life safety, and roads. I do think, and concerning to me, is this cookie cutter approach on the taxing in the county. I think the economic benefit benefits all people in the county, all property owners. I don't understand why you don't put in place a single county-wide beach nourishment tax that's paid by all property owners in the county equally, since we all derive benefit from the healthy beaches in the area. And I would just like to add, please don't involve the federal government or the state government, because whatever they come up with as a solution will probably cost twice as much and take 3 times as long.
Thank you. So we don't have the ability to do a county-wide service district. So what you're saying is, if we were going to take the approach, is we simply raise taxes across the board on all of our businesses, on all of our homes, and everybody in Dare County by a rate sufficient enough to pay for all the beach nourishment that we do in Dare County, and not take any extra out of any typical community. And I think, while I suppose that could be done, that is not what this board or previous boards have chosen to do, and I'm not sure that would be palatable in the communities, because we've got people now that don't want to pay the taxes that they already have. And if we're starting to tell the guy that lives in Kitty Hawk Village that he's going to be paying higher taxes to do beach nourishment somewhere other than Kitty Hawk, then I think we're going to have some problems throughout the county. I don't know if we could make that fly. Again, the approach that we've taken is that the community that is most directly benefited by the dollars that are put into it has to contribute some money to it, and that they pay those taxes. Our board and other boards think that's a fair approach, and so you call it cookie cutter, we call it fairness, and that's what we've been doing. Next is Joan Fitzgerald. She's on mute. Yep, Ms. Fitzgerald, you're on mute. Can you take yours off mute, Ms. Fitzgerald?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Okay,
Sorry
I hear
about
you. Great. So
I just wanted to make a comment. First of all, thank you very much for putting together this proposal. My husband and I are really extremely happy that the Dare County has been so active on this and moving forward on such an important project. So we're completely supportive of it. I raised my hand to make a comment about the gentleman who said that we should be passing along these costs to non-resident owners, or the question came up about passing them to visitors, because that, somehow doesn't come out of my pocket. And I just want to assure you that this tax comes out of my pocket. Whether I'm renting my home or I'm paying for my home and living there, those expenses come out of my pocket. I can't simply pass on those costs to renters, because renters have choices. They can go to Avon, they can go to Virginia Beach, they can go to Wilmington. They've got lots of choices, and it's a very price sensitive market. So I just wanted to make that comment, and thank you for letting me talk.
Yes, ma'am. And I would make one comment in response to that. The visitors are paying for half of this project. The occupancy tax, for the most part, is a tax that's paid by the visitors that come down and occupy that. So they're already paying more than 50% of the cost of the Avon project. Next is, it says S. Bennett Harper. Left, okay.
Skipped over Dave.
Oh, Dave, is it Dave Galker?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
First off, thank you very much for the thorough and informative presentation. It's really appreciated. I guess my question was on the 5-year replenishment. Would the expectation be in 5 years that you would have to raise taxes then? And I'm sorry, you may have answered that earlier, but I may have missed it.
No, sir. The expectation is not that we would have to raise taxes. If our model assumptions hold true, we build in some growth in the model. We build in our revenue growth. We build in our project cost growth, the escalation of costs over time. And so as we run our model at the tax rate that we're proposing, when it comes time to do maintenance, we could do that maintenance. The kicker is if those assumptions are wrong, if our revenue isn't what we thought it would be, if we have something that dries up the revenue and we don't get what we got, or the cost goes up more than what we projected, those kind of things that change it. Then if we decide to do the maintenance and go forward, we have to have revenue from somewhere to do it. We can only use what's in the fund, and if the fund doesn't have enough all by itself, then the only other place to get it is through the tax rate. And so those are decisions that would be made then, but we're not planning for that to happen. We haven't anticipated that would happen. To date, we've been doing beach nourishment since 2011, I think was the first project that came on board. And I don't think anybody has raised their service district tax yet. And some of them, the rate has actually gone down a little bit because of revaluation in some of the communities. So again, we're not anticipating that, but that's not to say that it couldn't occur. Roy Hogsted.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
It's crossed off.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
It's not on here. He's crossed off. Yeah. Mr. Hogsted, go ahead.
Hello? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, excellent. Yeah, I just want to thank you and the board for your thorough presentation. In fact, all the questions that originally sent in were already answered through the presentation, so I appreciate your thoroughness and the care that you've shown to this project. You know, as a permanent resident and a homeowner in Avon, you know, I think the beach nourishment is an imperative. It needs to happen, and it, you know, the plans that you guys have come up with absolutely make sense. The only concern I have is the speed at which the beach is going to erode after the nourishment is done. And, you know, I have quite a bit of experience with successful groins being built to protect the beach for a long period of time. In fact, in Newport Beach, California, they built a series of 8 rubble mound and sheet pile groins in the 1960s and 1970s. And that has been proven effective in stabilizing the beach for over 50 years. So I noticed, you know, in the presentation that you meant that there's a law now that prevents it, but would there be a way to divert a portion of the renourishment funds to lobbying the state of North Carolina to be able to change that law? Because, you know, $5 million or so of reoccurring costs to me could be completely averted if we were able to get that law changed. And that would apply to not only Avon, but also the other districts in the area, and greatly benefiting the entire area without having to do renourishment.
So I think to answer your question, you're correct that if we had other tools, we could make these projects last longer and therefore make them cheaper because they would in fact last longer. As we speak, we don't have those tools. We're a member of what's called the North Carolina Beach Inlet Waterways Association. We're in contact regularly with other beach nourishment communities. We've been in touch with the Coastal Resources Commission, and we've been pushing for years to give us some tools. Maybe jetties and groins aren't the right answer, and maybe a seawall isn't something any of us want. Maybe those things are true. But there may be other things, you know, artificial reefs that are so many feet offshore that dissipate energy, or geotubes, other tools out there that have been used in other places that can be compatible with what we want on the Outer Banks and what we want the Outer Banks to look like, but also can keep and preserve our beaches and save our money, you know, to stretch it out for longer periods of time. Again, we haven't been successful in that, and we can't get any movement off of that, and the environmental lobby isn't in favor of that, and so it's really hard for us to get traction for those types of projects that would help us and, you know, maybe be some compromise. It's not that we won't keep trying, but so far, again, they haven't been successful. Next is Basil Hooper. He's not connected. How about Linda Hooper?
Hello, I'm here. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
I just was wondering how you came to the conclusion that Avon would benefit mostly from this compared to the rest of the people on Hatteras Island, considering Avon is more the central location of everything, including our medical center. And it doesn't make sense to me that the town of Avon should have to shoulder this, because I'm just wondering where you are saying that we will benefit, since none of us that live here, or even the people that are renting, even in Hatteras Colony or other parts, we don't have access to any of that beach that's going to be replenished. Now, I do understand the part about the road. The road would be easier for people to drive across, but for part of that road, people are using that road even to go to Ocracoke. So it doesn't make sense to me that we are the only ones that will have to shoulder this tax. And that was where my main concern came from, because I don't believe that Avon is the one that's going to benefit the best. I think everyone will benefit best from it that travels from Oregon Inlet to Ocracoke.
It's a state highway, and there's no question that everybody in the state and presumably everybody in the country would benefit from that highway. Anybody that comes here from anywhere else that goes to the seashore, that goes to Ocracoke, that goes to Hatteras Village, whatever, uses that highway, and so they all benefit from it. But the test is to create the service district and charge the tax is who are the people that most directly benefit from it. And we believe that while there are other people that benefit from it, the most direct benefit comes in the village of Avon. I certainly don't think there's any doubt that the people on the east side of Highway 12 get substantial benefit from that. I don't think anybody could really argue that point. And I think that if you live in Avon, then your ability to get to the grocery store, your ability to get to the doctor you mentioned, to get anywhere, to do anything, to go to church, to see the people that you need to see, to go to your meetings, to have fire protection, to do all those things, are benefited by having that road open and clear. If you go down to Hatteras Village and compare it, yes, they have to get through there to get off the island if they go off to the north, but they can get off the island to get off to the south. They have grocery stores down there. They can get their groceries. Their churches are there. Their friends are there. Their neighbors are there. Their families are there. And they don't have to go to Avon to do that. In Avon, you have to go out there to do all of those things in Avon. So the benefit to the people in Avon is different than the benefit to the people everywhere else. And so when you start drawing lines, you take the lines where the people are most directly benefited, and that is the conclusion that was reached. On the west side, they get a substantial benefit, so they're paying substantially more in taxes. On the east side, they get a lesser benefit, and they're paying substantially less in taxes. And when the time comes to do projects south of Avon, then we'll do taxes there too. We didn't charge Avon taxes for things that we've done anywhere else in the county either. And so that's just the way that it has worked, and it does work. It meets the criteria in the statute, and so we have to follow that criteria. Thank you. Next is Tom Bronica.
Bobby, you've answered my question, so I'm going to pass and let the next speaker go on.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Okay. Pat Hughes. Pat Hughes, are you on?
I am on. Can you hear me?
Okay, go ahead. Yes, sir. We can hear you.
All right. Thank you, Bobby. I appreciate it. And I want to thank everybody that has worked so hard on this for going back, I guess, a couple of years. Y'all have been working on this. I certainly have been pushing sand back up underneath my house for the last couple of years. My wife and I, we live in Richmond. We have 2 pieces of property on Ocean View Drive on the ocean front. We're right in the middle of this. And, you know, I certainly do not want to pay more taxes, but I think there's feedback here. I certainly don't want to pay more in taxes, but I understand the need to do this and to do this as quickly as possible. Excuse me. I think when I first decided that I wanted to buy a Bobcat and keep it under my house was probably an indicator that raising the taxes a little bit to protect my property and the property of my neighbors is probably a good idea. So as I'll just wrap it up. I don't want my taxes raised, but I understand why we need to do it, and so I'm going to support it. Now I came in a little bit late, Bobby, so I need to ask a question. Is the 40-10 tax plan still the idea going forward, or have you all made changes to that?
We have changed that. You heard me talk about the model we have. We take that model, we change it every time we get new information that goes into the model. We got the latest occupancy tax numbers last week, and we plugged those numbers into the model, and it helped tremendously. And so that tax rate has now been changed from 40 cents and 10 cents to 25 cents and 5 cents, and it has also changed the percentage paid. So now Avon, instead of paying 50% of the project, is paying about 30% of the project. And so they're paying less than most of the other towns have paid for their projects. Next is, I may miss this name, Jean-Marc Curiac. Can you unmute yourself, please? Are you there? All right, I'm going to move on from that one. Next is Charles Latagano. Can you unmute Mr. Lagano?
I have no questions based on new information I learned.
Okay, thank you.
Tonight's meeting.
Yes, sir. Next is Daryl Lyles. He's out, left, okay. Next is Dr. Francis Mono. Okay. Next is Mary Ann Marsal. Can you unmute, please, Ms. Marsal?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. We got you.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate being able to be a part of this community meeting. And you've answered most of my questions, but I do have a question and a comment. So in Buxton, did everyone pay the 25% rate, or was it sectioned off the way you proposed to do in Avon?
Okay. In Buxton, everyone paid the 25-cent rate, but they paid it on both the east and west side. And the difference was that we had flooding that occurred on both sides of the highway. And so in that case, the benefits on the east side of 12 and on the west side of 12 were substantially the same, and so they paid substantially the same tax.
Okay, so my comment is, I think you'd have to agree that people on the east and the west side are both affected when 12 is flooded. And I'm in this situation where my property is 5 lots back from the ocean front and 1 lot from Highway 12. But I'm in that section A. So I really think the way that you've divided this up is unfair to me and to many other people. And I also, in thinking about all this, I realize, I think I'm right about this, that people who have that oceanfront property already probably pay much higher taxes than I do, and the rest of us do in Avon. And I would think it would be much more fair and hope that it'll be considered that everybody pay the same rate.
Again, I'll go back and say again, what the statute requires is that you be taxed based on the benefit that you receive. And I don't think, at least from our perspective, there's little debate that the people on the east side get greater benefit than the people on the west side. We have problems all along the east side from time to time, and maybe we don't at your particular house, but we don't have the ability to draw this down on a lot-by-lot basis. We can't pull out lots here and there based on somebody's determination that they may or may not have a problem. And if you don't have a problem today and we don't do this, you're going to have a problem soon. And so we've done the best we can trying to divide this up fairly. We think we've met the criteria in the statute, and so that's what we're doing going forward. It did not seem fair to charge everybody the same thing because the benefits were not the same. Next, we'll go to Mike McGuire.
Hi, Bobby. Thanks very much. Great
sir.
Presentation. I've spent most of my life doing them, and I know a great one when I see one, so thank you. My thanks, too, to everybody involved in this, and Danny, for your support. We really appreciate it as well. All my questions have been answered at this point, but I would make an observation based a lot on what I heard. Events over the past year throughout the country, and certainly recently in Washington, prove that government seems to be listening more to its citizenry than it does to other bureaucratic organizations. So I would suggest we launch a very robust effort involving the citizens of Dare County, much like we did with the Drive on the Beach effort, to go at the legislatures in both the federal and state levels and get changes made that benefit us all for the long run. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next is Jane Melton. Ms. Melton,
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we've got you now.
Thank you. All of my questions have been answered based on what was being presented this evening. I did miss the part of what you said about when 12 floods, about the ditches and the drain-offs and who's handling that, because it seems to be an issue. Could you let me know a little something about that?
Ma'am. So the stormwater drainage off of Highway 12 is the ditches and our DOT's ditches, and they are dug when Highway 12 was built, whenever they resurfaced it. I'm not sure exactly when the ditches went in, but the purpose of those ditches, according to DOT, was to take and collect the rainwater and the stormwater that ran off of Highway 12. It was not put in to take the water from the neighborhoods or from the lots and from the properties that surround it. It was just to manage their water. And that's what's called an inundation system, where the water goes into the ditch and it sits there until it either goes down into the water table or it evaporates, and it is not connected to a system that is to take it to the sound, to an outfall somewhere. And so as we've get more rain and we have these large rain events, then they fill up and it takes longer to go, and there's no elevation there. There's nowhere for it to run or nowhere for it to go. And as the sound rises, even putting the ditch to the sound, they tell us, means you got to, at a minimum, have a weir to prevent the sound from coming in because it gets higher than the ditch. And so they're not sure what the answers are. They are aware of the problems. We've been working with them for some time. We actually had a meeting last week with them, and those are some of the issues that we've tried to address. We'll keep working with them. I think the chairman in one of the upcoming meetings is going to talk some more about that. But we recognize it's a problem but I'm sorry to say I don't know that we have a solution for it yet. Next is Stephen Nelson. Yes, sir. I got you, Mr. Nelson.
Hello, this is Stephen Nelson.
Yes, sir.
I had initially wanted to ask some questions, but then you sent the FAQs and then this presentation, which was excellent. I appreciate it. I think you actually answered all of my questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you for listening. Next is Janet Paula. Ms. Paula, your audio is off, so I'm assuming can you hear us? Or if you unmute and, no, okay. Next, I'll move to Robert Stein.
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Stein, you're on. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, my question was again that the people on the beach really get the most out of the beach replenishment. And then, like, I'm over on Seashore Boulevard by Dairy Queen where we have the canals, and the canals are filling up too, but nobody's working on that area too. So I'm just wondering, will the beach replenishment work for both sides or will it just work for the beach?
So the beach nourishment plan is to serve two major functions. One is to protect Highway 12, to make sure we don't lose it, to make it operable, and so that, you know, we can keep it open as more times than not when we have storms. The second is flood mitigation, and trying to prevent the flood mitigation from the runover from the ocean that goes all the way across and then goes into Highway 12 as well, and into the ditches and then wherever it flows. And so to the extent that the wider beach and the enhanced dune area will mitigate that flood water, then it'll have some impact where you say that particular ditch in that particular area is not a project, and so the benefit to that would be the ancillary benefit of having a wider beach and a higher dune to keep the water, the ocean water out as much as we can. Next is Michelle Taylor. Ms. Taylor, would you please unmute? Ms. Taylor, if you're not there. Next is Laurie Westmoreland.
Yes. Hi. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So one of the questions that I had is, it looks like when you're creating these service districts, you are taxing them indefinitely for the foreseeable future. But you stated tonight that when named storms come through, you're able to get funds from FEMA. And even when you're looking at the Buxton project of doing the renourishment, you stated tonight that you would be doing about 150 feet of beach for the Avon, and in 5 years you would only be doing 75. So I'm assuming that in that situation that the cost of the nourishment would then decrease, but our taxes would not be decreasing. So can you comment on, and I'm assuming that when you did the Buxton Service District, you did an indefinite tax, but either confirm that, and then why, as you're going forward, do you not have a reduction if the reduction in the maintenance is less than the initial project?
So a couple of things. Let's get all of our facts straight. First of all, the beach is going to be about 120 to 125 feet wide. So the way beach nourishment works is you build, how much beach do you want to keep in place, or how much can you afford to keep in place? Under this project, there'll be 75 feet of beach added to what's there now. And on top of that 75, there'll be additional, 50 feet of beach added to take it out to about 120 or 125 feet wide. That additional 50 feet of beach is the erosion beach. That's the part that you're going to lose over the next 5 years, and that will erode away. That's expected, it's planned. The consultants have tried to gauge the erosion rate to determine how much you need to put there to do that. And so if everything goes as to plan, in 5 years, you'll have that 75 feet of beach that you added, but you will have lost the 50 feet that's supposed to erode, and you come back in and you do another project to put that 50 feet back in. Now, normal erosion that occurs, FEMA doesn't pay for. So when we lose that 50 feet of beach, we have to pay for that. That doesn't get any FEMA contribution at all. But we survey those beaches periodically to see how much sand's there, to see what our rate of erosion is, to see if it's lasting as long as we thought it was going to last, all of those things. And so we have a record of what the normal erosion is. If we then have a declared storm, and that means a storm where the president declares it a natural disaster or an emergency, that kicks in FEMA funding. And if we go after that storm, we can take how much beach have we lost from the time that we did it until the time of that storm, and we know what that is. And then how much did we lose from the storm, and we know what that is. And FEMA will reimburse us only for the part that we lost from the storm. So when we get ready to do the next project, to do the maintenance, FEMA gives us whatever we lost from the storm, and we put that with the money that we have, and we do the project. Now, what that means to the tax rate, I don't know, because I don't know what the cost of the project's going to be at the time that we do it. We don't calculate in FEMA funding because we don't ever know if we're getting it or not. And so the board has to set the tax rate every year. It's not, I said the tax rate would likely be indefinite, and I think that's a correct statement. But we can't set a permanent tax rate. Each board, each time we do a budget, each year has to set the new tax rate. And each year we look at it and see where we are, see what the projects are, see how the fund's doing, see what's going on. And we all look at our rates to see what we need to do and how we need to do it. And so, again, you're correct that it's likely to be indefinite, but it doesn't have to be, and it's looked at every year because the board has to readopt a rate every year. And based on where we are and what we need, if the project lasts longer than we thought, then we may not need as much money. If it doesn't last as long, then we may need more money and we need FEMA or whatever. Somehow we got to pay for that. So those are all things we look at annually at budget time, and that's the best I can do to answer your question. Next is Richard Williams.
Hello.
Hi, Mr. Williams.
Yes, you answered most of my questions. I sent a letter and it had to do with the permanency of the tax. However, I wish to make a comment on what everybody seems to have forgotten, that this tax is based upon your assessment, and therefore the equity comes out of the assessment. The people that have the properties on the beachfront, and whether they're commercial or not, are going to be paying are going to have a higher assessed valuation for which this tax is going to be imposed on. So there is an equity that's built into this system, whether they want to say it's cookie cutter or not. It's built into an assessment of the property, and therefore the people that have the higher, more expensive homes are going to be paying more in the property taxes as well as this additional tax. And that will change year to year.
And thank you. That is a good point. And similarly, when we do revaluation, I'll just use Buxton. The initial tax in Buxton was somewhere around 25 cents. When we did revaluation, we left that tax at revenue neutral, and the rate actually came down. I think it's like 19 cents now. And so the rate can change as the values of property changes and the amount of money we need remains the same. So those rates can change. That's everybody that I have on my list that wanted to speak. I know that we had some technical glitches last night. If somehow we didn't get you on the list and you're still on here and you want to speak, if you'll click on the raise your hand button on the bottom of your screen, or wherever it is on your screens on the bottom, wherever it is on your screen, Matt, our IT person up here who's monitoring this, will try to call on you to let you speak. So if any of you all that signed up, that somehow we left off with the technical glitch we had last night are on and still want to speak, then click on that and we'll get to you.
Okay, so the first comment is from Chris Wheat.
Chris Wheat, are you on?
Yes, sir, I'm on.
Go ahead.
Quick question. As I'm looking at some of the photos you've shown of the before and afters, there's a tremendous amount of area restored to what is National Seashore. Has there been any discussions with the National Seashore, since they don't want to seem to kick any money in, for a land swap of equal value to what is actually restored property that they would have otherwise lost?
There has not, with respect to beach nourishment. I will say the National Park Service has been a great partner. They have helped us tremendously with projects. Beach nourishment is not something that is favored by the Park Service. They don't allow that in lots of areas. Our superintendent and the Southeast Regional Director and the Department of Interior have worked closely with us to do these projects. They understand the importance of the beach to their park. Their limitation, like I guess with everything else, is they don't have money available to maintain everything they need in all of the national parks, much less contribute money to beach nourishment. But they have been a good partner. They've helped us tremendously, and they've helped us in expediting the permitting, and they recognize the need for the project. So I don't have anything negative to say about the Park Service, but I do know that we've asked and have actually talked to the Secretary of Interior at one point. They just don't have funds for this. So it's not something that is likely to happen in the near future. But again, if they're going to continue to have a park, then maybe at some point they can help us do projects as we go forward. Anyone else, Matt?
Yeah, hold on. My list keeps getting resorted. I have David Mecklenburg.
David Mecklenburg.
Or Medenberg.
Medenberg.
Hi, I just first want to say thank you for such a great presentation. Answered a lot of questions I had. I did come in late, and so one question that I had that I missed was, so if there's a house north of where the work's being done, what's going to happen to that area on the ocean side when there's going to be need to fix that beach?
I'm not sure if I follow your question. We're going to do a beach nourishment project in the area that we described. And it's going to be to the volume and the size that we've talked about already. And if your house is on the ocean front, then you're going to get beach in front of that house at the scale that we just talked about. And as that beach erodes, we plan to do a maintenance project in 5 years to put beach back, and we plan to keep doing that as long as we can. And so, I don't, beyond that, I'm not sure what you're asking me. And so, are you still on?
I lost them.
Well,
I think he was asking you what happens right out in front of the house that you answered earlier.
Okay, if the question is during construction, then during construction, right in front of your house, there'll be a bulldozer and a pipe, and there'll be sand coming out of the end of the pipe as they push the slurry onto the beach, and the bulldozers move it around. And so for an area probably 2 or 3 lots wide will be cordoned off where you can't go directly out your back door into the ocean. You'll have to go around that. You may have to go down to the north or to the south a lot or two to get to the ocean until they finish that area in front of your house, at which time they'll move further down the beach, and then they'll move the roped off area further down the beach, and then at that point you'll have access directly to the beach behind your house.
Next speaker is Donald Rice.
Donald Rice, are you on?
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Last night I submitted a question by email, and I did not see it addressed in your presentation.
Sure.
I know you've been on your feet for a long time, but it was particularly a question about the location of the preferred borrow area, which is shown in figure F. Did you receive that comment?
I saw it. I'm not sure if I know what your question is.
Well, perhaps I'll just go through it again, if that's okay.
Well, okay, sure.
I'm concerned that, most of the erosion on that stretch of beach comes from the northeast, and it's probably because of something in the underwater topography offshore. And noticing that the preferred borrow area is northeast of the problem area and aligned with the problem area, then I'm concerned that if we deepen that area, we might be inviting more wave energy to reach the beach and worsen the same problem that we've been trying to fix and maybe create a more permanent problem. Is there anything, any assurance that we've gotten from our consultant in that regard?
No. In order to use that bar area, we have to get that approved by the state, and I don't know I can't remember how far offshore it is, but if it's far enough offshore, we have to get it approved by NOAA as well. And so those impacts will be taken into account as we get our permits, and they then regulate how deep you can go and how wide an area you can take sand from. So that'll all get worked out in the permitting process. Right now, our consultants haven't given us any indication that that would be a problem or would create any problems. So who's next, Matt?
Next speaker is Jeffrey Scott.
I'm sorry, say the last name.
Scott.
Jeffrey Scott. Unmute, Mr. Scott, if you're on, unmute yourself. Okay, Mr. Scott, let's move on.
Next speaker is Harry Farrer, F-A-H-R-E-R.
Mr. Harry Farrer?
Yeah, you actually did pretty good with that pronunciation. Thank you.
Good. It was a lucky guess.
I'll take it. First, I want to start off with echoing with others. I think you guys did a great job taking a proactive, you and the board, taking a proactive action to take care of this and attempt to remedy the situation and for your ongoing creative financial options. Now, I may have missed this along the way, but I think we focused a lot on homeowners. What is the impact to businesses in that area?
Well, the impact to businesses is significant when the road is closed. We found that in Rodanthe. Our occupancy tax, our sales tax, everything suffered that at the end of that season when that road was out and closed. So yes, it is a definite economic impact to our businesses, and you know, the businesses that are along Highway 12 there will share in the cost of this. And so yeah, they benefit, and it benefits the economy, and it benefits the business owners that, you know, have their businesses in Avon, for sure.
Next speaker is Jan Howell, H-O-W-E-L-O.
Jan?
Jan.
Jan Howell, are you on?
Please unmute yourself.
Jan, could you unmute?
Okay.
Are you on, Jan Howell? We don't hear you. All right, let's move to the next one.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep up here. All right, got Mary Allen.
Is it Barry?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I didn't see my comments or questions submitted either earlier, but I'm just going to probably stick to one major area that I'm concerned about, and that is what many people were concerned about, which was the inequitable tax formula that you have come up with. We've been coming to Avon for about 44 years and bought a house back in 2015, one lot back on purpose, and ours is in Greenwood Place. And we're well aware of the flooding on Ocean View Drive, and we're really not impacted on Greenwood much. We can almost always drive through there. Highway 12 is more impacted than we are, and I've noticed many times that the west side on Kinnikeet, the Kinnikeet Drive or Road or whatever that is on the west side is flooded often, Kinnikeet Boulevard. And that's an area where cars tend to go off the road, and they're just flooded. Both the grass and the road are flooded there. And I was looking at, in your letter that you put on here that overwash has impeded and at times prevented our first responders from responding to emergencies, sanitation workers from picking up grocery or trash, the citizens performing from daily tasks, like attending doctor's appointments, buying groceries, attending community events, and so on. In addition to the safety issues, there's been flood damage to homes and businesses and negatively affected our tourism economy. And basically, I think that paragraph makes the case that everyone is impacted, and perhaps the local residents more than those of us who don't live there year round. Because when I go down there, I just hang out in the house when it's flooded. And if Avon Highway 12 is flooded, then it's going to be flooded, farther north in Rodanthe, and I won't be able to get anywhere anyway. So I just hang out. But I just don't understand how you can tax, just pick an area where we don't get the overwash that Ocean View Drive does, and then tax everybody at different rates. It just doesn't seem equitable. Yeah.
I've explained it a bunch of times, and I don't really know how to say it again. I'll tell you a couple of things. The state statute makes us do a uniform tax in each service district. And so I can't go to your house and pick out your house and say, we're not going to tax Ms. Howe's house because she just hangs out and doesn't use the road when we have a storm, but the guy across the street does, and so I'm going to tax him. And so we have to do this uniformly. We have to draw some lines. Everything is not going to be exact. We can't split a house in half. We can't split hairs at that. We can't pick and choose. And so what we've done is we've divided it as equitably as we can. On the whole, the people that are paying the higher taxes are getting a much higher benefit, and the people that are paying the lower tax are getting a much smaller benefit. And as I said, we can't go in and start trying to gauge how many times you drive on Highway 12 to determine how much your tax rate's going to be. Who's next, Matt?
I've got Larry Bickner.
Larry Bickner.
Hi.
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay. My question was about how this tax district affects business property owners relative to residential property owners.
The tax is on value. It's an ad valorem tax, and so it affects them based on the value of the real estate, the land and the building that the property sits on. And so if they've got a piece of property and a business that's got a high value, then their taxes, the amount they pay is going to be higher. The rate will be the same, but the amount they pay will be higher. If the value of that property is lower, then it's lower. It works just like the ad valorem tax that you pay each year on your home and on your business.
Next speaker is Michael David.
Michael David.
Yes, sir. Thank you all for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
So just a couple questions. I see all the beach nourishment that's been done here in Buxton and up in Kitty Hawk, and it's all gone. Every bit of it's gone. The road washes over in Buxton on every nor'easter, and it's just not stopping it. Why are we not solving the problem? Why are we not putting breakwaters in? I may have missed this. I apologize if so. I was a little late getting in.
All right.
We're just masking a problem that never gets fixed.
So two things. One is we can't do breakwaters. They're illegal. They're not allowed in the state of North Carolina. There is no hardened structure that you can put on a beach in North Carolina to protect the beach. The only tool that's available in North Carolina is beach nourishment. That's it. And so then you'd look at, what's the goal of your project? How much money do you have? And you set your goals. And the goal of the project in Buxton wasn't to stop there ever being water on Highway 12. The goal in Buxton was to prevent having Highway 12 turn out like it did in Rodanthe when we lost all the pavement, lost the road, had the whole island shut down for more than a month, had to have emergency ferries to get on and off the island, and to avoid those kinds of problems. And yes, the sand has eroded. It's supposed to erode. We're getting ready to put it back. And it'll erode again, and then we're going to put it back. But as long as it keeps that road in place, where we have a nor'easter and the water comes over the road, they can come out there and fix it in a day like they've been doing, then we've had a successful project, because that's the goal, is to, one, keep that road open and keep that road from being destroyed. Sand on the road, water on the roads, much like snow on the road in the western part of the state. They come out there with a bulldozer, they push it off, and the road's opened. That's what we have. That's what we're trying to make sure we can keep. But when that wave action gets close enough that it destroys the pavement, then we have multiple problems that exceed just trying to open a road by moving the sand off. Next, Matt.
Next speaker is Mike McGuire.
Mike McGuire. I thought we already did him.
I already spoke, Bobby. I'll pass.
Okay. Next.
I have Carol Peterson.
Carol Peterson, are you on?
Hello for your presentation. It was excellent. Number one, I want to thank everyone for being so proactive. As an owner of Ocean View Drive, it's important to us. But I do want to remind everybody who feels that it doesn't flood at their house today. When we bought our house, we had 2 dunes in front of it, and now we have none. It might not happen today, but it could happen tomorrow. So beach nourishment can affect and help everyone. Also remember that the beach in Avon benefits everyone. That's where our jobs and everything that we have there. But my main question, my short question is, you said this work would begin in 2022. Do you know about what month it would begin?
So assuming that there's some assumptions here. We're working on the permits as hard as we can go as we speak, and have been for some time. We've got to get the permits issued so that we can bid the project, and we would expect to hopefully bid the project this fall. If that all occurs on time, then the bid would be for a project that would occur beginning in the late spring of 2022. We would give the contractor a multiple months to do it. We would say you got to start by, I'll make this up for now, by April, and you can start as early as April, and you have to be finished by November, and then he can work within that time frame to do it however he wants to schedule it, so that we can get the best possible price. The more flexibility we give the contractor, then the better the cost is to us, the lower the bid. And so that's what the plan is. If everything goes as we're planning, and the bids come in at numbers we can afford, then that's what would happen. We'd like to think that that would start, in April or May. That's when the weather's good enough and the seas are down enough that they can do a project. And if they did, then it would take about 90 days and it would be completed before the end of the summer. That would be an ideal world. But again, the contractor has some leeway to change when he starts, as long as he completes it by when we say he has to complete it.
And our last speaker is Gail Judge.
Gail Judge. Ms. Judge.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. You're on.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you all so much for all your hard work. I have a somewhat pedantic question, but I'm just curious. You noted earlier that the tax rate would go from 40 cents to 25 cents per, I don't remember what it was, $100 or whatever, and then from 10 cents to 5 cents. I'm just curious, why wasn't it an even reduction on both tax rates?
Because the values of the property are different. Every property on one side is not the same value as the property on the other, and the value of the total district, if you drew a circle around District A and a circle around District B, the values of those two districts are different, and so it's not a one-to-one relationship. So for every penny we change it in one district, it doesn't change necessarily by a penny in the other. It's something along the neighborhood of 4 cents or 0.47 cents. I can't remember what the ratio is. And so we ran it back and forth, and we were trying to get it to as low as we could get it and keep it fair and still have enough money to do the project. But it isn't a one-to-one relationship is why they don't match. I think that's the last person that we had. If anybody else is still on and they have questions and or comments or whatever, on the screen is our website and where you can address your questions and comments to. We'll take them, and as I said earlier, we'll try to answer the questions that we get, and if we get comments, we'll share those with the board as well. We'll make some decisions. When those decisions are made, as I said before, there'll be another letter coming out to you. Everybody who's a property owner will get a letter. We'll tell them what the decision was, what we're doing, and it'll have a game plan in it. And we'll have another public hearing just like this in the coming months to talk about that game plan once it's been established and we know what we're doing. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming on the call. Thank you for all your questions, not only tonight, but for the emails that we received. They're much appreciated, and we're trying really hard to get the information to you all so you'll know what we're doing and you can make informed choices and make informed comments to us to help us do a better project. So again, thank you for everything and good night.